Hello, welcome to the July 8th, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test and then we'll go ahead and get started. Bear with me just for a moment. Hello, welcome to the... All right, sounds like everything's fine on my monitoring computer. I'm going to break out my chat. So let's go ahead and pop it out on my screen so I don't have to scroll as much. Okay. So my name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. So if you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or send a question via email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase, whether it's LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, and if you're running which version, such as 10, 11, 10.5, or 12, that information is helpful, and which operating system you're running. So that information would be helpful. If you don't see an immediate response when asking a question, we'll try to go through all of the questions in order. So chronologically, so we'll try to get to all of them. I'll work my best throughout the live stream to catch up to answer all the questions. But if you don't see a particular response to your question, if we could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be helpful. And it just makes it go faster for everyone involved, including myself, so I don't have to reread through the same questions. And if you wanted to, after the live stream tonight, we should have an index with all timestamps and all the topics covered in today's live stream, and that will be pinned to the top. And if you wanted to search for topics covered in previous live streams, you could go to go to cubaseindex.com, and Jan from Stockholm has been kind enough to to develop that site where you could search. We want to give special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude, who serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do this for the betterment of the community. And also, we want to give special thanks to Jazz Dude for compiling a lot of useful, very relevant tutorials and information in the Cubase Nation Discord. So give special thanks to that. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America as a product specialist, primarily focusing on Steinberg products. I'm based in Alexandria, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. area. And if you are watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. Okay, so we have a question from Jay from Connecticut. Does Spectral Layers have any implement to align phase in audio samples files? Okay, so let's say if we wanted to go to Spectral Layers and we wanted to do some, I will just take this particular track, we'll select the track here, and then let's go ahead and launch Spectral Layers. So if you wanted to do some, different phase within Spectral Layers, I'll take this to, what you could do is just select a particular region that you want. So if okay, I wanted to take this part of the sample, and if we go to layer, we could just say new layer. So as soon as we come over here, so we have kind of our original audio file, and we'll have layer 2. And as soon as we come up to layer 2 here, that we usually see kind of just a phase. Let me see if there's, I think there's usually just a phase setting. Let's just come over here to okay, so if you go to the standard layout, here you could just take that particular layer, that selection, if you have gone to layers and then make it, then you could at this point just flip the phase of that particular layer. So let me know if that will work for you, Jay. And it's all right, so we'll just unload the Spectral Layers extension. All right, so we see John Shaman on. We have RVO from the Netherlands. All right, so we have a question from John. Question, is there a way in Cubase 12 that I can convert a song solo to melody or chord, helping a friend to get a song notation on a musical sheet? So let's say if I wanted to do something like that. So if you wanted to take a song and a melody or chord. So let's say if I wanted to do something like this, to take a particular song and come up with the melody for notation purposes, we'll come over and take a look and we'll show in this. So let's say if we have MIDI or audio, we could just come directly to, and if we have a chord track, just load this project up quickly. All right, so let's say we have a project here. So I have a chord track. So what I could do is come right over here, and I'm gonna drag like the acoustic guitar part or a MIDI part directly to the to a chord track, and that's gonna generate the chords for us. And let's come over here and we could kind of clean some of this stuff up. I'll just do it quickly. But if we go to the melody, so let's say where our lead vocal is, at this point, we could go to the Very Audio, and we'll have Very Audio do its analysis of this. And we could, under functions, we'll choose Extract MIDI, and we'll create a new MIDI track. So now we could take our melody, and I haven't cleaned up the notation. We could do some stuff with that, but let's say, okay, I want this to be, we will just go to main, and then I can say like the smallest. I'll just do some quick cleaning up here. And so let's say, once we have set our key, so let's say this is going to be in a key of A, I think. So we'll come, and at this point, once we're in our notation view, we could go to scores, and we could put this into page mode, so we can see kind of what the page looks like. And from the scores menu, we can come over here and go to advanced layout, and then we'll say show chord track. And now we could have the chord track kind of laid out with our melody, just like that. So let me know if that works for you, John. All right, so we have Stefan checking in from Sweden. We see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin, saying welcome back. So yeah, I had a couple days off for a quick vacation trip, so I had a really relaxing time in Pasadena. Okay, so all right, so we have a question. Hello, is it possible when having a project with different tempo events to export that project for mixing and retain those tempo events when importing it back into Cubase for mixing? All right, so if it is, a project that's being exported, if you're exporting it to a different version of Cubase, obviously the project information would carry over the tempo data. If it's going to another program, what you could do is choose to export a standard MIDI file, and you may have to just put in like a single MIDI note. So if we put a single MIDI note in, and we could just say ignore, don't route to anything, mute the note, whatever, make it super long. But you may need one traditional MIDI part, but then when you go to File, to Export MIDI file, that would then export the tempo information to the other person. That person could give you the audio file and the MIDI information, and there's a preference in Cubase that you may have to enable. So if you go MIDI to MIDI file, and we say on import options, that we actually choose import, and we will uncheck ignore master track events on merge. So that may be checked by default. So uncheck that. And then if you're coming from a different program, the tempo track could be exported as a standard MIDI file, and that's how you could get it directly back into Cubase. So let me know if that helps. It's from Digital Piece. All right, we see Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas. All right, we see Jan in Stockholm from Cubase Index. Thanks for joining us today. David Reuter from Nashville. Hope you're doing well. And Jovanovic 3D from Slovenia. Thanks for joining, being part of the community today. We see Richard James. We see Marcos from Brazil. All right, so we see a question from Marcos. Say, I have a question. UR44, not UR44C. The oldest has less noise than UR22, just a curiosity. So I think that the UR22 and UR44, the original generation, will have similar. They use kind of the same converters and the same mic pre, so I think they would have similar noise, but they're both very quiet interfaces. All right. All right, so we see all right, my chat field jumped. All right, so a question from Matt Elston. So we see a question. Last year, Steinberg made available a free plugin, Lo-Fi Piano, as my Wavelab 11 Pro and Cubase 12 Pro no longer need USB dongle. Can the plugin be dongle free? So currently, I believe that plugin is still going to utilize the USB-E licenser. They're kind of in a process of migrating, content and instruments directly over to the new licensing system. So for instruments, they've already done Backbone as well as Groove Agent 5. But I don't think that the Lo-Fi Piano is still, I don't think that's made the migration yet, but I know that it's being worked on, so I'm not sure exactly when, but I think that you will still need to use the USB-E licenser to run that. So we see a question. Is there a reason why Cubase 12 doesn't work well if MS Edge is open at the same time? So on my studio computer, I have them kind of running all the time. So sometimes, depending on your internet connection, like Wi-Fi connection, sometimes can be problematic for interrupting audio. Having audio system interrupts, where it's basically saying, hey, come here, and it interrupts the audio. So that could be down to the particular, network connector. So Wi-Fi sometimes could be problematic with that. If it's with the audio, make sure, sometimes if the audio isn't, you can't hear audio from your web browser, come over here to the studio menu, to studio setup, go to audio system, and then check release driver when application is background. And then if it's just like your audio interface isn't working between both, then at that point that should fix that for you. All right, so we see Matt Irwin also checking in from Nashville. And he's saying hi to David Reuter. And David's watching with Kristen Parisi from Big Tent. Great writers. All right, so we have Nick checking in from Essex in the UK. All right, and we have Aldi Duda. This is following live from, I think it's Bayam, Germany, or Bayam, Germany. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Okay, so we have a question from David Reuter. What are the C3, D3, E3, F3 pads in B-Box and Halion 6, and can you demonstrate how to use them and how to assign chords to those individual pads? Okay, so let's go ahead and open up just an instance of Halion 6. So B-Box is kind of a like a little drum, kind of an older drum, kind of like an early drum machine instrument within the Halion. Okay, so we'll come over here to B-Box. All right, and let me just come over here to the macro. So let's say now if I wanted to and we'll make sure, hang on, that this is all right, so let me just turn this off. All right, so when I come here, okay, all right, so we could play different patterns. And so let's see, when we come over here to, so I think that these will be just variation on the patterns. So when I hit E3, so with B-Box, it's maybe not the most, it's used for triggering different variations. So those are like, different patterns that you could trigger. All right, so, and then can you demonstrate how to assign chords? So let's say if I wanted to go to an instrument that was maybe made a little more sense for chords. So let's say if I just come to, let's load up, let's say a Haliotron. Okay, so now when I wanted to come to this track, we'll route this to MIDI channel 2. All right, so now when we come here, we could have these chord pads, these pads here trigger chords. And so if we wanted to just come over here, we could do snapshot chord. And then I think if I play just, let's say, let's see if we can. So if you wanted to assign the chord, and then if you wanted to rename, so we can say, okay, this is E minor or an E6 chord. So at that point, so you could just say, okay, I wanted this to be a D major chord here. So I could right click and we'll say snapshot chord. I'll play the chord. All right, and now when we play that, we can just, again, rename the pad, and we'll say D major, or just say D. So now when I come over here, So any chord that you play, just kind of select the pad, right click on it, snapshot chord, and play it. And now at that point, as soon as you... And then if you wanted to assign a trigger note, you can say, okay, this C1 triggers this chord, you know, C#1 triggers this chord, D1 triggers that chord, etc. So let me know if that makes sense, David. All right, so you just see a question. Hi, Greg. I've created a preset in the Logical Editor to show only the drum tracks, and I could go back to the previous view by using toggle, but when I assign the same preset to a macro, I can't toggle. All right, so let's say I'll just do a new... Just do a new project here. Okay, so I'll just call this drum. Okay, so let's say, so let's get to, I guess it's a project logical editor. And we'll go to the setup. And so we want to select media type is, let's say name contains drum. And then, so let me just see if this is, if you have it under transform, if we come here, so if we have it set to hide track, toggle, so say if I come here, okay, so so at this point, if, and maybe you can let me know if this is how you had it set up. So you can say I want to hide track. All right, so let's say if you wanted to show only drum tracks. All right, but let's say now if I choose select, so let's say we're going to select only drum tracks. And then at this point, we can say as a post function, we'll say show selected tracks. All right, so now if I come here, we'll select and hide, and then we'll see only drums. And let's see if we want to. So I think if we do it like that, so let's come over here and let's show all. All right, so when we do this, it'll select the drum track and hide everything else. All right, so it might have to be two functions depending on how you set it up. So let's say if I come here and for a post process under channel and track visibility, we say show all channels tracks and hit apply. Then we could just, so you might have to do two different presets, one to show the drums and one to show all of the tracks. So so let me know how you had it set up, and if you did it kind of the same approach as this, that would be helpful. And that's from I am Rasmus. All right, so you see question. When trying to run real-time preview in Spectral Layers 9, it says my CPU is too slow, but it's higher than the minimum spec listed on the website. Any tweaks you can think of to solve this? So sometimes I notice this, and Robin, the developer, had kind of commented this, that some of the processes, can be incredibly, when you're doing kind of the dynamic spectral editing. So let's say if I have this particular file, and let's go ahead and launch just my spectral layers here. I realize that this could be incredibly CPU intensive as we do processes. But I noticed, like, I would get the message often when trying to preview, like with EQ match when I was working on it. So now if I wanted to just take a particular selection here, so let's take a rectangular selection, and let's say I wanted to go to my process here, and I just wanted to do maybe hum reduction. So as I work with this, we could, or I'll just choose a different process that you might be able to see a little easier. So let's say if I wanted to come to maybe like a noise reduction. So as we preview, just so let's say if I wanted to take this selection, and while we're previewing, I could make adjustments kind of on the fly. But if it's going to be something like with EQ match, so and this is just an i9, so this is like almost a 3-year-old processor now. But I noticed it on EQ match, and there I did see that Robin had posted, if you go to the Steinberg forums and look under EQ match, that was problematic in the initial release, and there is kind of a version that Robin had posted from, I think, a Google Drive to fix the EQ match. So let me know if it's with EQ match. But just because something your computer is doing exceeds the minimum requirements, realize that if you're doing kind of dynamic, like real-time spectral processing, which is often something that's going to be done, and it's kind of a breakthrough in Spectral Layers 9 to be able to do that in real time. And the reason why you didn't have dynamic real-time spectral editing is because it's so incredibly intense math-wise. So you're going to need a fast computer for that. All right, we see Jazz Dude has posted about the summer sale, so you can do lots of great VST instruments on sale currently. All right. So we see Uno Memento from Finland. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we see from David Reuter a question. In Raven, there are effects knobs preloaded with different effects locked along with the sound we selected. How do we select different effects in that effects section? All right, so let's load up and from this in Halion 6. So let's go ahead and open that. Okay, so let me just see if I could find one with some more effects on it. Okay, so when we look at kind of the right-hand section here, so let's say, we look at kind of, this is kind of, we could see kind of our preset here, Heart 6. So we'll hear that this has kind of a bit of reverb. And if we come over here, we could actually now kind of see almost like the directory tree of how all the sounds are created. So if we go to the Raven bus, you could actually see kind of the reverb setting here. So if you wanted to just come over and let's say we want to go to, so at this point you could add different effects. So let's say I wanted to go to new effects and I wanted to add a delay. So we'll say, okay, let's add a multi-delay. So now I could come over here and as you just kind of click on, once you have the edit, once you click on a particular area, you could remove the effects here, or you could just choose to edit. So let's say, okay, in this reverb, I want it more pre-delay, and I want it to change, the room size of the reverb, and I wanted to adjust the mix. So, and then if you say, okay, instead of a quarter note delay, I wanted this to be, a half note delay. So just kind of look at the Raven bus here. So as soon as you come over here, and then you could just right click and you want to say new to add different effects or to actually edit the particular effect that is currently selected. So let me know if that works for you, David. All right, we see Yuha just saying push that thumb up. So yeah, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, and make sure that you hit the thumbs up, and that allows us to continue to do these live streams. All right, so we have a question from Best Cream Jesus, and my chat field just jumped. So this question is, hi Greg, I know that there's a way to reset the plugin / automation. Is there a way to do a similar thing to audio events? So I'm not sure if you wanted to come, and if it's going to be like event-based editing. So let's say if we have this particular audio file, I'll just make it larger here so it's easier to see. So if it's with like event envelopes here, that could be done just by going to audio, and then you could remove volume curves. If you've done like processing on effects, so let's say if I come and, okay, I wanted to do a process. Let's say I want to do a fade in, and then I wanted to, reverse that particular, that particular thing. So our fade in turns into a fade out. So if it's offline processing, I can come directly to, If we go to our direct offline processing and with the clip selected, you could right click and delete all and return back directly to the state. If it is kind of like different editing, so let's say if we've done clip gain automation, so let's say if I have something here, so we could see kind of in the info line as we adjust the volume here. So let's say, so you could see exactly there. So say if I click on the event, we could adjust the volume directly here. So we could set that to 0 dB. And if we've done all sorts of other edits, you could just, erase. And then if you wanted to go back to normal, to the original file, you can just kind of extend back with edits. So let me know if that's what you want to do, if there was a specific type of edit that you wanted to do to the event. All right, so we see Soren checking in from Sweden. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see a question from Jay from Connecticut. If I understand correctly, ADAT can only support 8 channels of audio in or out. However, when sending digital data, i.e. VST system link, what are the throughput, bandwidth, and range boundaries? So basically, if it's just for transport, it's only going to use 1 bit of one channel. So let's say you have 24-bit audio connections with ADAT. You can use up to bits 23 on the particular ADAT channel, but you could do the 24th bit does all of the synchronization between the different events. So you can still pass audio, it's just the 24th bit is handled for synchronization. If you're sending MIDI over, it's going to take, I believe, the whole channel, all 24 bits of like the ADAT stream or the digital audio stream. But if it's just synchronization, it's just using that 1 bit of the like the 24th bit of the connection. So it's much smaller than and basically that's just for the synchronization. So just a comment from Jazz Dude says ADAT's from the 90s, so they never thought about transfer. That's why it's limited to 48K or 2 channels for 96K. So actually with ADAT, you could do 4 channels at 96K and 8 channels at 48K. All right, we see John Costigan just giving kudos to Jazz Dude for all of his work. Well deserved. We appreciate everything you do. All right, so we have Lawrence Koch checking in from Rhode Island. Thanks for joining us. So we see a question. Hi, Greg. How are you? I have a question. I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. I have a question regarding VST instruments. If we use multiple MIDI tracks using a single VST plugin instead of individual instrument tracks, does the CPU consumption be lower? So generally, it could depend upon the plugin. I would say 99% of plugins, that's the case is if you spread it across multiple instances, it will actually be able to utilize CPU chords. If CPU, you could utilize more CPU cores. So if you're doing everything like 16 different sounds in one single instrument, generally that's only going to take one processor. Now there's some exceptions to that. So if you have like Halion Sonic SE or Halion, and everyone has Halion Sonic SE, but if you come here to the options inside of Halion, you can come over here and activate multicore. So At this point, you could have multiple sounds playing, and then the actual the plugin itself can utilize multiple cores. Most plugins don't do that, so you get better CPU performance where each sound is loaded into its own individual instrument. And that way it spreads out the data across multiple CPU cores. So for the most part, a good rule of thumb, unless you're running your instrument has multi-core support, then you would want to spread out like one sound across one sound per multiple instances. All right, so we see Peter's it's enjoying nice weather in Montreal. Thanks for joining us. All right, so you see from Fat Monkey, I hope Steinberg find a solution for the Alder Lake E-core problem in Cubase 12 soon. It's been many months now, so I'll make sure to pass that along and see. I wasn't aware of a problem, but I don't always hear about it. All right, so we have Camille checking in from the Czech Republic. Thanks for being a part of the live stream today. All right, so we have a question from Jan. When Steinberg have update a VST instrument to run without the E-licenser dongle, must I do some configuring on my side? For example, Groove Agent 5 for run without dongle. Thanks, Jan. So it's basically, you don't really have to do much, but you would go into your Steinberg account. So let's say if we come over here, and I did a video on this kind of showing it how to do it with Wavelab 11.1. So let's say if we come over, I think if you go to account.steinberg.net, that you could see all of your accounts, and then you would see a voucher in there. So what you need to do is to take the voucher, and that will migrate the license from the E-licenser to the new Steinberg licensing. And so at that point, you could do that. You could still run your E-licenser, but that way you're able to run Groove Agent without having to utilize a USB E-licenser. All right, so we see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas on the live stream. So thanks for joining us. All right, so we see what's with no Cubase summer sale. So, generally, I think it, I know there's a lot of people that are expecting it now, and sometimes the sales promotions are based upon the release date. And since the release date changed, some of the promotions may not be happening when they usually do. So, there is a summer sale currently going on for VST instruments. But I think we may see, it's not going to be on the same schedule just because, Cubase is usually released in November. And this year it was released in March. So at that point, it may not be on the typical schedule. But there's always different promotions going on. See, Michael Teams has started the ice cream distribution. Thank you very much. All right, so we have a question from Stephen Fleming. Is there any way to rearrange VST3 effects in the media bay or FX dropdown? Some manufacturers, installers leave a lot to be desired, leaving FX in odd categories. So yeah, what you could do is as soon as we go to your studio menu, you'll see your VST plugin manager. And at this time, we could just start with a new collection. So you could actually copy the current collection. So let's just say, all right, so now we have a new collection. And what we could do is just say, okay, in this, I have, this plugin and I wanted this in synth. So what we could do is just drag it into the synth category, and we could make your own categories. You can make your own folders. So if you just wanted to, right click here, we could just, see different folders. So you could make a new collection. If you wanted to plus, we could add, all plugins or different, so we have a lot of different options here. So if you wanted to create a folder and call it whatever you want, at that point, you could create your own subfolders and organize your plugins as you see fit. So try going to, once again, the studio to VST plugin manager, and then you could click on the plus to create a new collection just right there. All right, so we see Richard James, SL, Spectral Layers 9 CPU problem. It's while trying to unmix stems. I have an Intel i7, 16 gigs of RAM. So, I don't think that, for most of the times that unmixing stems, can take a long time, that would be a process to do in real time. So it's more of an offline process, Richard. So, and probably an i7 is, not the fastest chip, around anymore. So, all right. So we see Michael Teams just wishing that I had a great time on vacation with my family. So yeah, we had a nice, relaxing time. Got to go to Malibu and drive over to Topanga Canyon. So I got to take my wife and son on that ride. So it was really nice. And Michael was granted us 1 gallon of chocolate chip ice cream. Sounds like a perfect thing for a hot summer day. And Michael wants people to whack the like button. And Nick is saying lash the smike. All right. Okay, so we have a question from Dallas LaRue. Is it necessary to use crossfades between clip gains? So generally not. So, with the clip gain, if we come here, let's say I hit Shift plus X to split, that as we do this, it's not adjusting any of the position. So, when you need to do a crossfade is, let me just take my snap off, is, generally not when the amplitude is increased, but when there's kind of overlapping audio. So now if I just hit X, then we could adjust a crossfade, but just because we've done, it doesn't have any effect on the zero crossing information when we do clip gain. So I would say no. There could be an instance where maybe it's so abrupt of a change, if you are adding, 24, dB of gain difference, it might seem abrupt where you might want to do a crossfade, but it's not going to add a pop because the zero crossing of the amplitude of the audio file hasn't been affected. All right, so we see Best Green Jesus saying, wow, that's exactly what I wanted, plus more. Thank you so much. I think it was for resetting the events, so glad that helped. Okay, so we had a question from Craig James. Recording a choir and want to play the backing track through monitors for the choir without the microphones. coming through. Is it possible? So, if you're going to be doing that, and this is obviously why a lot of people will record with headphones so that you don't get the speakers coming back into the microphone. But generally, if you're careful with the placement of the monitors and you're careful with the placement of the microphones, so it wouldn't be a good time to use like, a omnidirectional pattern or a figure 8 pattern, depending on where the microphones are. So, but, you can avoid a lot of it using, mic technique, but, and monitor placement, like if you, like I'm sure many of us watched kind of the Beatles Get Back, and you can see that they're recording through a PA system. Like they had a PA system basically going throughout the whole session. Then that's what they were monitoring through to kind of, like they were performing live in the studio. So they're kind of comfortable jamming. So, there's people that have done it, but there's a chance you might get some leakage through. So sometimes having the monitors very soft can also make a difference. Okay, so we see, Dear Greg, in Cubase 12, is there an easier way to save individual songs from a live stream recording? Okay, so let's say if I wanted to come here, we could do this for multi-track. I'll just do like for a stereo recording, but the principle will be the same. All right. So let's say if we have kind of a long contiguous recording that we want to take into different sections, there's a couple of techniques we could do. Okay, so let's say this is like, multiple songs, like a live set. So one way is to just come over here and say, this is song 1. So you could use markers creatively with this. So let's say I'm going to add a marker track. Okay, and with this, I want to add a cycle marker. Okay, let me just undo that. So let's say, and if I wanted to, I could set a preference, and this is a good preference for this scenario under editing, where you could say cycle follows range selection. So at this point, when I select kind of a region here, I could set the left and right locators, and then I'm just going to click on add a cycle marker, and let's say, okay, this is song 2. This is song 3. Song 4. Song 5. All right, so now if we wanted to export those, we could come over now and choose to export, and let's say do our audio mix down. And we could just say, okay, I wanted to do based on cycle markers. So let's say, okay, we have 5 cycle markers. And we could say after the export, and we'll show this, we could say, let's create a new audio track. So I'll say export audio. If I did everything correctly, it's going to add. So each of the cycle markers has been set. And we're going to export based on these cycle markers. So we have song 1, song 2, song 3, song 4, song 5. And these are new audio files. So, and you could do that based on multiple files. So you could do exporting if it's a multi-track. When you go to the export audio mix down, at this point you could choose multiple and then export based on cycle markers, and that will create, all of your audio tracks. And at that point it will, do a multi-track export. One other way of doing this, you could just take a selection here with the range selection tool and go to range and crop, and then save that project. And, you could do it like that. And if you wanted to go to audio to bounce selection, you could just replace the particular events. And then if you say, okay, this is song 2, and I'll show this in a multi-track scenario as well. All right, so let's say, okay, I wanted to, and I'm just going to hold down Control or Command plus Shift. So I can say, this is song 1. You can say, and you could actually kind of do stuff like with, different track versions, but you could also just say, okay, let's go to range and crop, and then that's only song 1, or I want it to come here, hold down, Control plus Shift, and that will globally select, and then again come over here to range, crop, and then you could save that as its own project as well, or render the particular files. So those are a couple of techniques for doing that. Let me know if that makes sense for you. Hang on, my son is knocking. Bear with me just for a moment. Apologize for the delay. I had to get my son a movie on. He finished his Lego project too early. All right, so we have a question. So speaking of multi-core CPUs, is it now advisable to have a bunch of cores available, and does Cubase benefit from that? So yeah, Cubase has been kind of multi-core savvy for a long time. So it will do that. So if you get, if you had to err on the side of a faster processor or more cores, if you had to kind of balance that, I would go for the faster speed. But if you have a faster speed and more cores, that's even better. So yeah, it's get as many cores, but go for a high CPU speed as well. Okay, so we see anybody else getting a lot of crashes lately with the latest version of Pro 12. They fixed a hang up on closing program, but I have been getting it freezing, then just disappearing, shut off. Anybody? So I haven't been running into that, but we'll see if other people have. Or we see from Gerald Ely that the VST plugin manager tip is the one he needs, so it's great. All right, so we see from Kevin Mehmed, I was thinking of getting Spectral Layers 9 Pro. His question, I already have Cubase 12 Pro. Can I use this to cross-grade? There's a big difference in price. And what are the differences in the Pro versions in Spectral Layers 9? So, since you didn't, you got Spectral Layers 1 with Cubase. But since you don't have, you didn't purchase it, that version's not eligible for cross grade. But and with some of the larger versions of Spectral Layers, that's going to allow you to do more noise prints, more editing tasks. You can unmix stems from particular projects. In Spectral Layers 1, you could just do vocal removal, but the other tools you could do not only vocal removal, but split up drums, bass, guitar, piano, and vocals. So, and more kind of AI parameters for selections and capabilities. Coming up with noise prints, coming up with EQ match. Those are some of the functions that you get with the Spectral Layers Pro 9, and you could go to the website and we see, you also mentioned, Kevin, that Spectral Layers is in the summer sale, so it's a great time to jump up. All right, so I just see a comment about question is directed to Jazz Dude, but I'm planning to get a Threadripper CPU, but I was unsure if it would really be a benefit to Cubase. Cool, I'll get one. So yeah, the Threadripper was so there was added support for that in version 12, but we see that there will be a new Ryzen coming from Jazz Dude as well. All right, we have Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina. All right, so you see from Kevin, just says, I never got a cross-grade version. How do you prove you have another, or do you need to use your dongle so you can upgrade and pay less? So again, I don't think that there's an upgrade from the Spectral Layers Pro 9 or 2. I don't think there's you can upgrade from Spectral Layers 1, but, check out the summer sale. Okay, just reading through. All right, just seeing a discussion between Jazz Dude and Got Your about direct monitoring and dealing with low latency for vocal recording. So, many audio interfaces like Steinberg UR, I think you mentioned you had to clear it, but have, built-in compression and reverb for the artist without any, without any particular latency because it's powered by the actual unit. All right, so we have a question from Kevin Mehmed. Could you explain the differences in Spectral Layers 8 to 9 Pro? So the big change, one, it's going to be on the new Steinberg licensing. It's Apple M1 native, and also you have the capability when you're doing processes and a lot of spectral editing. If you wanted to remove noise for a particular section, you kind of can take a noise imprint and then remove the noise kind of in offline, like you process it because it's, incredibly intense math. But now in Spectral Layers 9, the big thing is to be able to do those processing with a real-time preview so that you can make the changes quicker. So you don't have to process, listen, say, oh, what if I did it 10% less? Process, listen, undo, process, listen. And that could be kind of the tedious aspect of doing spectral editing, but now with Spectral Layers Pro 9, you have the ability to do kind of real-time previews. So that's the big main difference. All right. So just just read this. It says questions. I already upgraded to 12 Pro, but wanted to wait until I have my new PC cleanly installed from scratch. Another reason for me not to wait for new CPUs to be available in 2023. So, all right. So we see comment from Richard James. Love that cycle export trick. These sessions highlight some serious gems every time. Nice one, Greg. It's always a good one, especially if you're dealing with like 200 audio files, like for games and stuff like that. All right, so we just see a comment from Robert Garrett. The scroll bar at the bottom, edit screen moves too much info with the smallest moves. So if it's this, that seems pretty reasonable to me. So if I use my scroll wheel, I could do this. So let's say if I zoom in more here, I'll take this. And if you are adjusting it, one of the things that you can do also is, let's say if I'm adjusting here, but hold down the shift key and that will give you a fine control. So just kind of using, so I'm not sure if you're manually moving it, but that seems kind of as expected here. And if you're using the scroll wheel, I could come, so let's just say we use the scroll wheel here. We could adjust, but if you need fine control, just hold down the shift key and that will give you fine control. So let me know if that is helpful. All right, so we see Mark Rabin. Glad to see you on the live stream. Mark is checking in from Montana. All right, and we see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. Thanks for joining the live stream. All right, and it's Mark Rabin's birthday today, so everyone wish Mark a happy birthday. We hope you have a wonderful day of celebration, and we won't be insulted if you leave a little early in the live stream. We're glad that you could take part of your birthday and join with us. Everyone wish Mark a happy birthday. All right, so we see just a comment, follow up the lead vocal to melody. Greg, thanks. I need to try it out, but I was getting a lot of noise, which is converted to notes. So I need to clean up the noise notes, noise coming from bad recording. So yeah, I mean, once you kind of, you know, get it cleaned up, you could do it pretty quickly, I think. So, all right, so we see Michael Teams is giving 1 gallon of birthday cake ice cream to Mark Rabin. It's very generous. Okay, so you see MIDI remote question. Is there a command to change the script for a MIDI remote or perhaps a macro logical preset I can bind? So I don't think, so let's say if I go to like my Chord Nano Control, you know, we could have different mapping pages here. But I don't think that there's a keyboard shortcut. I had kind of asked about this also where we could just kind of, you know, switch between these. So I don't think, you know, I brought this, so I don't think that there's a function for it, but let me see if maybe it was just added and I haven't looked in a bit. Yeah, so I don't think that there is a key to do that. You know, like a function key just to kind of go to the previous mapping page. But I passed that along already, and I'll reiterate that again. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we have a question from Yash. Hi, Greg. Hi from UK. What mouse do you use or recommend for Cubase or Nuendo? I've seen people who use trackball mouse on YouTube, but still not sure. What is your view? For a long time, I ran trackballs. You know, but I just kind of use generic mouse. I don't like the Apple Magic Mouse. I really just don't like that particular mouse. Like I have a new computer for work coming, and you know I just told him specifically not to get that mouse and save $49 over a 2.5 year lease. Generally, I like the Microsoft mice. I use just a mouse, and sometimes because there's so much like the scroll wheel, I find is like an essential part of editing for MIDI and, you know, adjusting different parameters. And I like the trackball, and I know a lot of people love the trackballs, but the scroll wheels is often, I think like even on the Kensington, the scroll wheel is like a ring that goes around the particular, that goes around the ball. And it's not nearly as accessible. You know, there's a lot of people that will take mice and, you know, configure. I think Logitech has one. I think even Best Cream Jesus has done a tutorial on, like, you know, it has like 13 buttons that you could assign to different functions directly from the mouse. So, you know, I tend to use Microsoft or Kensington or Logitech mice. I'm currently using a VSSO Plur mouse. And I use this, I have a mouse and keyboard because I have 3 computers in my office, and I have a mouse that I could hit a button and it switches between 2 different Bluetooth channels and one 2.4 gigahertz receiver. So, and my keyboard does the same thing. So I could switch between like I have a Microsoft Surface Go that I use to monitor the chat. I have my MacBook Pro for work, and I have my i9 Intel desktop for my personal studio, and I use the same keyboard and mouse to go back and forth between the three computers instead of constantly switching keyboards and mice. So I have one set of keyboard, and I just have like a really cheesy, it's like, it works great, but it's like a keyboard. Let me see if I can find the company. iClever. And that's the keyboard that I use, and it's like $39, and that switches between three different computers as well. I also like mice that have quiet clicks on them. There's a Logitech mouse that I've used over the years. Let me see if I can find the model number on it. But it has like a quiet click. So when I'm doing like tutorial videos, there's nothing more annoying than hearing, like, if I have one mouse, this is a click that you may hear in a different mouse that has a silent click. So I like the silent click. It's less annoying. And I don't have to edit like mouse click sounds out of an audio. So, but I just, but generally I really kind of like the Logitech mice, and think that I've never had a bad Logitech mice or mouse. So. Okay, just reading through more comments. Okay, so we see a question from Michael Teens. I was tracking last week as normal, but when I opened the project again, there was nothing there. I went to the media pool and loaded tracks from there, but no audio, just images. What happened? So sometimes if you record, maybe the project wasn't saved, but you get a little prompt. So let's say if I do a new recording here, so we'll add an audio track. All right, so I'll just go ahead and record. I'll turn the click off. Okay, so I have an audio file recorded here, but let's say if I don't save, like if I just close the project and I choose not to save, then you'll get this, recorded new file since the last time you saved a project. Do you want to delete these? And if you choose delete, then you close the project and those audio files could disappear. Now, one other thing you could do, Michael, if you didn't do that, is go to your pool window, and you may notice that some of the audio files may be in the trash folder. So see if you open up the trash folder, if you see any files in there, and then you could drag them from the trash into the audio folder and restore the project like that. Okay, so just see a question from Mark Rabin. So it says, Greg, so you have a KVM switch or just a keyboard and mouse is Bluetooth with multiple receivers? I don't have a KVM switch because I didn't want to necessarily, it's a lot of cabling to work. And if you have multiple monitors, it gets tricky. So I just have multiple. I have 2 channels of Bluetooth for the keyboard and mice, and one 2.4 gigahertz, like a little USB receiver that I put in, and I just use the same monitor. And the monitor, I just switch between 2 different inputs. And I've been super happy, so I don't have a desk with 3 different keyboards and 3 different mice on it. So. All right. So we see just some items wished for future upgrades. Power one is a power indicator and how much a plugin signal a single plugin is using, kind of like the latency view. Realize that some plugins aren't actually, depending on the plugin and its process, because one of the things that you could do with VST3 plugins, and one of the advantages of VST3 plugins is when you come over here, we could see that, and we go to plugins, you could suspend VST3 plugin processing when no audio signals are received. So sometimes, depending on, if a plugin is not doing any compression at all, it takes less CPU cycles. If it's doing a lot of compression, that may take more CPU cycles. So these, different, sometimes, whereas the latency is going to be consistent, the CPU usage of a plugin can vary widely depending on if the plugin is processing audio at that point or not, or how much processing that audio is doing or not. So it's generally not a static figure that's constant. So those, so indicating that, you may see a point of reference, but that could be different during the verse or during the chorus or the bridge or the ending or the solo section. So we'd see another feature request, a subwoofer button added to the control room with a crossover, since Cubase has such advanced monitoring. This is the only thing missing. So yeah, I've kind of requested for a subwoofer, but generally most of the subwoofers have their own crossover system. So you may not want Cubase to dictate the crossover, but it would be nice to have the ability, I think, if you had a 5.1 setup in the control room, to just come over here and activate like a sub from the 0.1 where you could add a sub directly there. So I would agree with that. That would be nice to have. All right, so we have a question from Michael Teams. Maybe walk us through the start of a project to reinforce how to set up the files and folders to save the project. Thanks, Greg. All right. So yeah, having good file management will always kind of improve, your functionality, and file management's like really important. And it's always interesting when you talk to composers who may have to have, multiple versions. And I think one time we had Mark Roos, who was on one of the Zoom meetups that we do at the end of the month. And, watching him as he does his file management, it's really interesting. But when we're starting a new project, it's really easy to come over here and say, create empty, and then hit open on this folder. But what you want to do ultimately is to each project to have a unique folder. So even if you come over here, just say new folder. And I know sometimes you don't name the particular folder, but, or you don't know what the name of the song is. So you may say, working title, whatever. So, and at that point, so every project, if you put it into a unique folder, that would be good. So if you had an album with 10 projects, you may have one folder for the album and each of the songs as a subfolder within that particular master folder. So once we do this, now anytime that we record audio, it'll now, so what you want to do first is name the audio track. So let's say, okay, I want to record bass. And now as I record, we are creating the name of the audio file. And so we can see that the file name is bass01. And if I record again, that'll be bass02, bass03, etc. So when we come over here, we can see bass underscore 02, bass underscore 03. These are all going to show up into our pool. And when we go to our media menu, we'll go to our pool window, and we can see that we'll see these 3 different files. And if we scroll over, we'll see that they're going to be in our delete folder, working title, the folder that we created. Now, if we have imported loops or imported audio, so when I come over here, we can say, let's go to media, and I just take an audio file here and drag that in. So we have Tech House Bass. Let's go to our media menu. We'll go to our pool. We can see that we've now added that particular folder. So that file will reference. Now the pool will reference audio files wherever they are in the project. But if we drag files in, there's a preference that could help. So if you go to editing, to audio, and we could say on import audio files, you could have check copy all files to project folder. So if I have that unchecked and I drag a file in, and now we go back to our pool, we'll see that our pool window may show that this particular file that we just dragged in is going to be in a different folder. So now if we wanted to consolidate, and let's say if we were sloppy and didn't have this preference checked, so let's say we go back to the preference again, and it's under editing to audio, copy all files to the project folder. And if we were sloppy about this, we could right click and say, prepare archive. So we'll go ahead and proceed. And now the file that we dragged in is now copied directly into the particular folder as well. So that way, all the audio files used in the project will be stored within the common project folder. Now that we have the project folder actually defined, at that point we could choose to, just back up that project folder. So when we look at this, let's say we go to my desktop, and let's say if I save this project, okay, so now at this point, when I go to my Finder or your Windows Explorer, we'll go under Delete, and everything that I need is for this project, the project file, the audio files, the images, will all be within that one particular folder. So, so think of each actual project, each song being a unique folder as well. All right, just had a question may have just come in. Okay, so I think I got both those questions from David. We already discussed in the live stream. All right. All right, so we see Gerald Ely's using the iClever ergonomic mouse. And Mark Raven is using Logitech along with Best Green Jesus. All right, so just see, so Windows users can use mouse without borders to use one keyboard and mouse over PCs over the local area network. It's free. So thanks for sharing that, Jazz Dude. Okay, so we see Michael Teams was able to recover some of the audio that Pablo found him. That's great. Okay, so we see from Best Green Jesus, just says, I have a question about spectral layers. Sometimes it stops working when I move it or adjust it. What am I doing wrong? Would it be the best course to print the audio once I've done what I need? So if you're in spectral layers, so let's say if I come over here, you know, because basically we go in through like an ARA2 interface to, so let's say if I go to my spectral layers here, and make sure that you have the latest version as well, because there are, you know, different spectral layers updates that come out as well. And there's one that came out with Cubase 12. So now when I double click here, and if I've done a spectral edit, so let's say, okay, I just wanted to, let's say if I just grab like my eraser tool and we're erasing away different components or just deleting a section. So I'll just do this. It's more visually obvious. But you know, to make it permanent, all you have to do is if you come here to the extension, just choose make track extensions permanent, or you could choose to come over to your audio in kind of older versions of Cubase. You could just come over here and choose bounce selection from the audio menu. So. All right, so. Okay, so we have a question. While in chord pads and in pattern mode, can you select the style of pattern to be played, R&B, hip hop, country, jazz, etc.? All right, so let's say I have I'll just load up. All right, so let's just say, okay, we have our organ. All right, and we want to go to our chord pads. So if you want to take kind of any MIDI information, so let's say we'll close this and I'll just go to some MIDI loops here. So now if I wanted to play the chord pads, and let's say if we go to edit and we wanted these to be patterns, what we could do is I'm just going to find some patterns. So anything that you have MIDI wise, and there's a number of patterns that you also get under loops and samples. And if you go to the sequel library, so let's say I want to play cool organ parts, but I'm not a cool organ player and my skills aren't good. I will come over to organ parts. So let's say, okay, I just wanted to drag out any different MIDI part. So let me just, all right, so now I have this particular MIDI part. I go to the chord pads, and once we select from playing chords and we click on the edit, and then we go playing chords and we say pattern, I could just drag a particular pattern and drop it here. So any MIDI data. So now as I play the chords, it's going to just play different patterns. So let's say we'll try a Latin disco pattern. Let me just solo this and we'll listen to it. I'll find something a little more interesting. All right, so let's say I want to take this and we'll go to our patterns and I can just drag and drop the MIDI part right there. So now when we do this, and then you could just kind of trigger the pattern. So it's not really where Cubase gives you an option, but any MIDI part that you have, you can just drag and drop and create your patterns for the chord pads just like that. All right, so we have Thermonuclear War saying hi from Serbia. So thanks for joining. He'll be back later. All right, so we have Jeff Sabelski from Chico, California. And Jeff is saying hello to everyone everywhere around the world who have come together on our figurative staff that we should name the undo staff, and the unique chord that we all make from Chico. So. So we have a question. If we put each project in its own folder, are there any issues with moving project folder locations later? For example, after songs are created, trying to group the songs into a new album folder. So there isn't, because, like if you moved it from, let's say, like you have song, let's say the song is in its own folder and you move it to within a folder, so it's that your song that was in its own unique folder is now a subfolder within the album folder. The relationship always looks from where the project is for the song, so there's no consequences for moving it. The consequences get to be when you move it and some files aren't in the project folder. That's when consequences could come up. But okay, so we see from Jeff Sabelski, hi Greg, it would save a little time if we get the option to create a new project folder when choosing a new empty project. So you do have the option. So, and this changed in version 11. So when you go to new project, you could choose to use default location, but in Nuendo 11 and Cubase 11, this changed to prompt for project location. So once you do that, now you're immediately prompted to define the folder. So a lot of people kind of go and hit enter a bunch of times and kind of blow through this. But, once you go to new project here, you can now, by default, if you have it set to use default location, but just switch that to prompt for project location, which is the new default behavior for the last couple of years, then it will prompt you to define the folder for that project. So. All right. Okay, so Mark Rabin just says, okay, I got a question. Imagine that. So yesterday, track guitar and Vox, 2 mics on guitar, 1 on Vox. The bleed. What's the best way to avoid the bleed? So, one of the things that you can do in Spectral Layers Pro 9, there is a debleed process, and I probably don't have any files to show. But what Spectral Layers can do is basically take, one is, obviously with microphone placement, it's incredibly hard. But what Spectral Layers could do is you could actually take 2 different audio files, and it could look for the content in one audio file so it could take, okay, we're going to take the guitar file, then we want to take the guitar and look for the same harmonic content in the vocal mic, and then just basically delete that. So you could do debleeding that way. And that's probably the best process, other than, sometimes you get the magic performance where, everyone sings, but then people want to do a vocal overdub, or if you do pitch correction on the voice and then you correct then you adjust the guitar bleed in the background. So if the voice is flat, you move it sharp. Now the guitar is out of tune with the bleed. But check out the debleed process in Spectral Layers Pro 9. So. Okay, so we see Jeff Sabelski. I think it's about the right click in a folder to create new folder in the window 11 on. So yeah, it should be the same way, but maybe it's probably before I showed that function. All right, you see a comment from Jack Shot Records. Greg, you are the Google of Cubase. There's still developers who have been, who are still with Steinberg, have been with Cubase since version 1. So they probably know more than me, but I just probably get asked more random questions than other people do in their job. So I try to help people out. All right, so we have Rude Screen checking in from the UK. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. All right, so just see a question. So basically, you have to select a sub-style to select a genre. So if you wanted to, you could see your genres here for content. So not all content will have that, but you can select style or sub-style. So if you say style, I want this to be pop, and then we could have this as sub-style. So you could change, but sub-styles can maybe narrow it in for you under the musical category here. So this would give you kind of more options. Okay, I want soul organs, and drag that out so you could see sub-styles there, but that will allow you to kind of filter and choose and select by more particular styles. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to access, is there a way to use the mouse wheel to jog the playhead without scrubbing? So I think, let me just see if there's a modifier key for this. Just see if remember that there was some trick to this to maybe get it to. All right, so if you come here, you could, if you go just to the bottom, like to the play position, so say the primary time display, you could, use the mouse scroll wheel here just to change the position, or if you want to change the beats, you could do it like that. Let me just see if there was some other. All right, so shift will. But yeah, see if that works. So let me just reread the question. Yeah, so is there a way to use the mouse wheel to jog the playhead without scrolling? So yeah, if you just go to your timeline, you could just move it there. So let me know if that works for you. All right, so we see question for Jeff Sabelski from Jeff Sabelski, or just comment. I would still like to access the mixdown folder from the pool. All right, so let's say I just want to do a quick mixdown. All right, so let's say if I come here and I choose create audio track. All right. Okay, so now when we go to our pool window, we could see our new file here, and that's in the pool, and we can see that it's going to be I'll just move the path over. Okay, and I think that, one of the reasons, let's see if it's shown here. So, if the file isn't, because the pool represents files that are shown in the particular project. So many times people will mix down, and if you don't mix down into the project, that it's not automatically created. So let me see if I change that preference, on import audio files, and I mix down again. All right, and let's see where. So, depending on, so you see now that we did that, this is going to be placed into the mixdown folder. But when we imported the mixdown, so if we don't import the file, the pool represents all of the files that are in the project. So if you do a mixdown and it's not in the project, it's not going to show up. If you choose to import the files with this particular preference, it disabled it. When it's imported into the project, it goes into the project folder. If this preference under editing audio, copy all files to project folder, if that's unchecked, we can see that now the mixdown folder is shown directly in here. But again, the pool is only showing not all the files, but just files that are with the particular project, that are in use by the project, not created by the project, but in use by the project. So if you want to see it in a pool, uncheck that preference, and then you could see the mixdown, the files in the mixdown folder in the pool for the project. All right, so we have a question from Ralph from Germany. I have a problem. I'm on Cubase 11. When I move from one to the other track version, the first expression point will not notice. Do you have a workaround? All right, so let me just see if I could create. So I'll add an instrument track. And I'll just do a quick HSO. All right, and I'm gonna go to the macro editor, and we'll say, okay, let's have this be expression for our dynamics control. Okay, so I'm going to just draw in, excuse me 1 second, my son's knocking. Sorry about that. My son is bored. So, all right. Got him a Lego set yesterday and he finished it, half of it last night. So I could have something for him to do. All right. So say I draw in a note here. Okay. And I'll go to the track versions and let's duplicate the version. All right. So, and let's say if I come here and I draw in expression. Okay, so now all right, and let's say, okay, just want this to, so let's say, and let's say I switch to the other track version. And here. All right, so let's say I have a different CC value. All right, and just gonna reread the question one more time, make sure I have it correct. It says when I move from one to the onto the other track version, the first expression point will not notice. Do you have a workaround? All right, so let's say I come here to the track version. So let's say I go to the copy, and let's see if it's just. Okay, I'm just gonna rename. Okay, and let's say come here and we look, so this will be, and I'll just rename this track version. Okay, so we, All right. It says when I move from the other track from the first expression point will not be noticed. Do you have a workaround? Okay, so let's say if we play this one, so let's say we go to low and we play the sound and it's receiving all right, so say that's kind of a low expression. And when I come to the high expression, let me just take my snap off. So we'll hear this. All right, so we have that change there. So let's say I'm going to go to this first version here. So let's say this is where you have kind of low expression where it's going to be low and gradually get louder. So we'll edit this. Okay, and I'm going to switch this, and so it looks like it's chasing correctly. One thing to check is when you go to preferences and go to editing to Midi, so check if you go to Midi here under preferences that you have, chase controllers is activated, but it looked like that was kind of chasing the controllers correctly there. So, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding, Ralph. Okay, so we see a question. Hello, Greg. How can I disable effects and group channel tracks? So generally the tracks themselves, since they don't have data on them, you could, it's not disabling the track, but disabling any processing because there's nothing to disable. But if you wanted to take the processing, so let's come over here and set up like a group track for drums. All right, so I'll set up a group track and an effects track. So I'll take my drums and we'll route these to an effects channel track. So let's say, okay, let's put on a reverb. And I wanted to take these and route them to drums, a drum group. Okay, so right now, since these don't have any media on them, what you would do, so let's say on my drum group, I have, an insert. So let's say I come here, I want to take all my drums through an envelope shaper. So what I could do is just disable, bypass the inserts on the track because the track doesn't have any media, but you could bypass the reverb. And if we go up, we could bypass any of the group processing. But since there's no actual processing, you can't really disable the track because there's no media on the track. But you could disable the processing quite easily using that. right, so uno momento is granted a pint to everyone as their throat is probably starting to dry. And since it's Friday, why not? Thank you, it's very generous. All right, so we have Panos checking in. I believe he's from Greece. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. How can I move custom macros I've made on my laptop to my studio computer? You could. There's going to be, if you go to your application data folder or your preferences folder or locations on Windows, and it's kind of different on either one, but on either OS. But if you on the Mac, if you want to go over here, you could go to your library folder, and it's kind of hidden. You have to hold down the Alt key and go to library. And then if you go to presets, you could come over here and you'll see key commands. So all of your key commands will be just right here. And you could just simply come right over and transfer your key commands with all your macros. Another easy way, if you want those to be in sync, is to just come over and go to your edit menu and go to Profile Manager, and you could export a profile, and that would include kind of all of your settings, and then you could import the profile onto your other computer, and that would transfer many different settings, including key commands and macros. See, Mark Rabin just saying, "Oh man, that's magic," but I don't know what it was. So, but I'm glad you liked it. All right, my chat field just jumped. All right, so I think probably the magic was maybe with the Spectral Layers, and I think that's only in the Pro version. So, all right. All right, so we see someone has his family's calling in for dinner. It says, "Thanks, Greg, for your stream, and Jazz Dude for your valuable input. He'll snoop around the Discord later this evening." And all right, well, thanks for joining us. All right, and we have Yorgos joining in. Thanks for joining. All right, we see Odavali saying, "Still waiting for Steinberg to release their new merchandise clothing line for Soundtex underwear." So it probably wouldn't be a big seller, I would imagine. All right. We see Michael Pierce from Cambridge. He's in Cambridge tonight. So came in just for a like. So hope you're doing well, Michael. All right, so we see, hi Greg, when setting up a new MIDI controller in Cubase 12, how would one use a rotary encoder to jog the playhead like you just showed with the mouse? Okay, so let's say, all right, so let's say, let's see if we can get an encoder here. So let me go to my MIDI remote. I'll just come over, and let's say I wanted to take this remote, this encoder here. And let's see if we go to transport. And I'm just going to reread it, make sure. to jog the playhead. So let's come over here to key commands, and let's look under transport here, see if we can find all right, so let's see if I just have it set to forward. Yeah, so I just have it set to forward. And then if you want to have another one set back, so that's almost like fast forward here. But let me see if there's another way of getting that going. So I'll just move this encoder. All right, let's see if we have jog right. And I'll set the next one for jog left, the other knob. All right, so, and let's see if I, all right, so I can do, all right, so that's more of a scrub. Yeah, so I mean, you could always, let's just see if there's, so you could try forward and rewind. So let's say if I come here and I just say forward. So now, so try just forward and rewind. So I could just move this knob. But, you know, you could maybe also just use a mouse, you know, use the AI knob function, but I could dig around a little more to see if there's, because I think there's some way of just kind of moving just, you know, so if you hold down shift, you can click, like when an empty space is, or alt shift, you can also just kind of, but it might be I don't think this might be a better way of just navigating without kind of like a jog wheel. So if I have like my CC121 open, where this has kind of a dedicated jog function right there. So let me just see if I'll try jog function one last time here. So the jog left, jog right, but let's see if that. So, but it seems like it's in scrub mode, which, like, so, but, and so some things to try. I'll play around with it. If you want to email me, just at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to render and place more than one track at a time so as not to go over mix down? So, you know, if you wanted to, you know, render multiple tracks, so let's say if I'm here, I'll just, so let's say I have all of my effects on, and I just wanted to, just for time's sake here, and I'll just crop just this. So let's say I'll just crop the range. So let's say I have just a little bit of audio and I wanted to render both of these with the effects. So if we select both of the files, you know, if we wanted to go to render in place, we go to our render settings, and we could choose to, if you have your channel settings, we could choose to mix down to one file, and that will just take that and mix it down to one particular file. If we wanted to render multiple tracks, so let's say we go to render in place and go to render settings, we could go to complete signal path, and then this would render, and you know, we'll say so we won't give it a custom name, but we'll just say we want to and we'll take these excuse me, and let's keep the source, we'll mute the source events. So at this point you could render multiple files, and let me make sure I change the settings this time. So if we wanted to do this also, we come over here and we'll not choose to mix down to one particular file. And so we choose render, and then each of the files, multiple files, will be rendered in the original. So you could render multiple files independently or multiple files together into one kind of bounce down folder if you want. Yeah. So let me know if that's helpful. I'll just revert this project. All right, so we just see, just comment, wow, Greg, give your library of your Halion. So yeah, the Halion's amazing. So, but you know, it's on summer sale. So there's a lot of stuff that's already on promotion now. So if you're interested in getting stuff for the library, you know, to expand your Halion content, you know, definitely check out the summer sale. It just started yesterday, I think. All right, my chat field just jumped. All right, so we see from Jeff Sabelski, Greg, can you give a brief use of the brick wall limiter on the master track and the reason why the default is set to -3 dB? Can it be set closer to 0 dB? Thanks. Yeah, sometimes, you know, a default 3 dB might be just as a buffer for kind of professional reasons. But let's say I want to take this project and we'll run the brick wall limiter. So, you know, you could definitely run it hotter if you need to. And if you wanted to, you know, once you have the settings there in the brick wall limiter, I think you could save that preset as default preset, and you could have it at -3 dB. Seems like we should be. So if you want it to be set to, just, closer to 0, set that and go to your presets and save as default preset. And then you could, every time you open up the brick wall limiter, it could go from, -3 to 0 dB or whatever value you want. All right, so I just see, Greg, how do I add this space under your marker section here? So I'm not sure if it's like this marker section, but what this is a divide track list. So at this point, we see this, and it's kind of a subtle thing. If you click here, we can see all of our tracks. But if I wanted my marker track to always be at top and not be kind of, like stuck in the middle, I can move my marker track. Let's say I move it to the top, and then I could click on the divide track list right here. And now my markers, or I could put other tracks in top. So I could scroll up and down and still have my marker tracks visible there. So you'll see like this little slash to turn it on, or to turn it off, to disable, or to enable. And then if you wanted to move tracks up, you can. Or you could just right click, and I think if you come over here, there's a, you could move it to, I think there's a way of moving it in one of these options. Let me just see, but you could just drag it directly to the top. Okay, so we see with Ralph about the expression chasing between different like the CCs on track versions. So yeah, if you want to send a picture, you could email me to at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. All right, so I just see a comment. Hi, Greg. The voice-over artist presenting Spectral Layers has a very wet pronunciation with mouth clicks, extremely off-putting. Several comments about it were just deleted. Please bring it up with Steinberg's. I'll mention it to them, but yeah, maybe we could use that as a Spectral Layers feature, to how to remove mouth clicks. It seems like a good process there. All right, so we see a question from Shane Hay. Hi, Greg. There seems to be an issue in Cubase 12 Pro with Windows 11. The record enable button On only the first track is always set to enable record both MIDI and audio tracks. Any ideas? Anyone else have the same issue? So one thing to check is, maybe to see if it's because it is selected. There is a preference, and see if this makes a difference for you. I haven't noticed it on my systems. But if you go to editing, I think under project and mix console, you can have enable record on selected audio or selected MIDI track. So if you open up the project and maybe the first track is selected, it could be caused because of this particular macro. But maybe if anyone else has experienced that, let me know. But try changing the settings, those preferences again. So if you go to preferences, to editing, project and mix console, see if you change those two, if that makes a difference for you. And just also see Shane just mentioning it won't switch off when I click it. So, yeah, if you want to send a picture or send a project, I'd be happy to take a look at it. And again, you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, just reading through comments. All right, we see Mark Rabin is sneaking out for grabbing a meal. And once again, happy birthday. We hope you have a great day of celebration. Okay. Just reading through comments. All right. All right, so we just see maybe a special how to install the Halion content the right way might be nice. So, there's a utility that really kind of helps with this called the Steinberg Library Manager. So, once you go to, let's say, the download assistant, so, and once we're here, we can see kind of all of our Halion content that's, directly there. So let's say I want to go to, and at this point, if you wanted to, so let's say we will download, so let's say we go to our VST instruments and plugins, and we scroll down to Halion. All right, so, and at this point, we could see our Halion. So we see our Halion 6 here. All right, and then there's the content for Halion 6. So we could choose to, at this point, if you needed to download all the content to a secondary drive, you could just come over here and choose the download directory here. So if you wanted to reset it, you could do it directly there in the settings. So if you're like, okay, I want to put this on an external drive, you could do that. Or if you've installed all the content over, um, you could, within the library manager, you could pick and choose the default location for the libraries, and you could also just choose to for each library to move to a particular folder or hard disk, just like that. So once you install it, it's pretty straightforward to do. So but just think of, if you need to physically first time install it to a different location, do that from the Steinberg download assistant. If you need to, once it's installed, move it to a location, you could use the Steinberg library manager and do that, and it's pretty straightforward. All right. So we see from Peter just asking a question. Speaking of brick wall limiting, should I place a bus compressor, for example, before or after the limiter? Thank you, Greg. So most people, would generally do the limiter as a last step and try to get, all the gain that they can out of the limiter. So generally people will run like a bus compression before the limiter, but there's no real rule, and it's, whatever, if you did it the other way around and it sounded great, it sounds great. So. All right, so we see Peter is back with that. He and his wife went out for a Costco run, so that's good. Thanks for joining us again. All right, just reading through comments. All right, we see Uno Momentos going out on his boat in a lake for inspiration for songs. It sounds like a great way to be inspired for songs. Have a great time. Write some great songs. All right, so we see, hi Greg, Cubase 12 has ARA. Why doesn't Isotope RX come under ARA? By the way, I also use Spectral Layers Pro very much. So I don't think that, I'm not sure if Isotope actually uses ARA as a communication protocol. So I think they have kind of like their own editor protocol, but it's not ARA. That was, I think, originally kind of developed by Celemony. So, but I don't think that Isotope RX kind of works with ARA. So you may want to check with them. I'm not absolutely positive. Okay, so we see Shane Hay will probably email over the tracks for where it's being stuck. So I'm happy to take a look at it for you. Jeff Sabelsky is just mentioning that mouth clicking, tongue clacking, heard that on my cousin's song, saying phrase twice, only clacked on one, and maybe removing the clack with Spectral Layers 8 Pro. It's his master track from Analog Tape. So. All right, so we see Jeff Sabelsky saying his Steinberg library size is almost 500 gigabytes. That means he did it right. So, all right, so we see a question from Hein Ray. Says, Greg, thanks for your amazing work. Is there a possibility to use two different audio interfaces at the same time with Cubase? So it could really depend on your operating system. So on the Mac OS, you could have what's called an aggregate device. So you could go into your audio Midi setup, and then you could configure two different audio interfaces. And on Windows, some people will use the ASIO for All, which is kind of a ASIO driver that allows you to utilize different audio interfaces through their standard Windows drivers. Both solutions are often less than satisfactory. And one of the big reasons is one, it can compound the latency of all of the audio interfaces. So that's not good. And two, most of the audio interfaces, we're always dealing with, sample accuracy with audio. So there's no way to synchronize the two different audio interfaces. If you send audio to one device, it may not play in sync with audio from the other device. Some audio interfaces you can stack. So if you have like a Steinberg AXR 4T, like the Thunderbolt version, you could actually run two of those interfaces, or you could run three of those interfaces stacked together. And that's because of Thunderbolt. With USB, you notice that, you don't see the ability to stack multiple interfaces. If you have FireWire interfaces, PCIe interfaces, often those can be stacked. So you can get multiple versions of the same audio interface together. And run those, stacked. But, generally you don't see USB audio interfaces that have the capability of stacking, and that's why. So, and it's kind of the same with all companies. So if you want more expansion, get an audio interface that has like an ADAT output, and that will allow you to get more ins and outs for your particular setup. Okay, so let's see if I think I'm maybe at the end of the particular questions. Let's see how we're doing on time. All right, so I'm going to go to some of the questions that were mailed in. And if you've learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that as well. All right, so let me go to some of the other questions that were sent in. All right, so we had a question, how to add additional chord pads. And it says, I want up to 30 chord pads they would love to have. All right, so when we go to our chord pads, we will just kind of come over here. So let's say we have our chord pads, and now we could see that we can have our chord pads enabled here, and it's kind of set up like a MIDI keyboard, like a piano keyboard, where we have C, C sharp, D, E flat, E, F, etc. But if we go to kind of our setup here, let me just go to. Let's get this little drop-down menu. Let's see. I'm just blank on this. Let me just. Okay, let's go to the settings cogwheel here. And we go to the settings, we'll see pad layout. So right now we have it set to keyboard for 1 octave. So if I want it to be 2 octaves, we go back, we can see 2 octaves, but we could also not be bound by different keyboards. So if we wanted to say, I wanted to see a grid with 4 rows of 16, we can now have 64 different chord pads visible at once. So to get there, go to your settings and then go to the pad layout. You could choose whether you want it to be keyboard or grid. So if you choose grid, you can have 4 rows and number of columns. You could have 16. So that will give you 64 different chord pads, more than doubling the expected 30 All right, so let's just come back. All right, so we had a question. It's from David Reuter that I saw on a Facebook post. I said we would do it in today's live stream, but how to get started with Groove Agent. So let me just go to a different project. All right, so realize that Groove Agent can work in two different modes. So one can be basically functioning like a beat agent, like an MPC style drum machine. And the other mode can be kind of like a actual like virtual drummer, if you will. So when you come over here, let's go to, we'll start with our virtual drummer. So how I would generally start with Groove Agent is, you can come over here, you can load kits, and that will just load the sounds, or you could load kits with patterns. So I have one here, Forget the Past, which is a standard kit. I'm going to click on Follow Transport. So now when I play, we'll see that Groove Agent will play. And if I change the tempo to 88 beats a minute, it's automatically going to follow the tempo and sync. So I go to 124. I go to 100. It's automatically going to sync. So often what we see when we first open this up is we could switch between two different modes. We have our instrument sounds. So if I wanted to play these, and we'll see the MIDI note that they respond to right here. And then we have pattern pads. So we could have up to, in Groove Agent SE, we could have up to 16 different patterns. And in the full version of Groove Agent, we can have 128 patterns. But when we start, and we can look at the patterns, we see that these are color-coded. So we could have intros be green. We have endings, which will be red. And then we'll have different patterns. We will have fills. Now, so the blue patterns would be fills. And then we have red patterns, which are endings, green. So go, start, red, stop, ending. And then we have these yellow patterns. And each of these yellow patterns, I could take this particular pattern and we could adjust the dynamics of it. So I want to be very soft. So we can move vertically to adjust dynamics, and then we can move horizontally to adjust the complexity. So if I want it to be more complex, and we'll have some other different controls here as well. So let's say I want this to do a halftime feel. Now, since this is basically playing its own pattern, we could add more swing. Or if we wanted to quantize this more, we could adjust accordingly. We'll have some different MIDI controls as well. So let's say if we, want to come over. Now, let's say if I wanted to do a fill every 4 measures. So I don't have to program that. It's just going to randomly do one of the 4 fills every 4 bars. Now we could also come over here and adjust auto complexity. So I could say every bar, just go 1 or 2 levels of complexity up or down. So it's not playing the same thing over and over again. So we have this, and let's say, so I could trigger these patterns directly from these MIDI notes, or these patterns can be dragged right into the project window. One other way of getting the patterns, let's say I want to capture all the randomness and the fills, is I could take this particular MIDI input and let's set this to our Groove Agent kit, and then I could just hit record. And now everything that is being played is being recorded directly into the project. So all the fills, So if it was just doing like random fills and it was like, oh, that was so perfect, but it'll never be the exact same again, you can capture it as MIDI. Once you're here, we could alter the sounds. So if I wanted to edit the instrument, and you could hit the E key to go back and forth between the instruments. But if we wanted to come over here, I could select if I click on my kick drum, I could say, okay, let's add more room sound to the kick. Or I wanted to add more bleed. Or let's say I wanted to increase the tuning of the kick. So tune it low. And if I want more of like a piccolo snare, I could click on the snare and just adjust the tuning. So any of the elements we could just click on and say, okay, I want more overhead sounds in the cymbals. Or I want to take the clap and I want this to be a large hand clap, like multiple people. Or a single hand clap, the lonely hand clap, or, small. Now, once we go to the mixer, at this point, we could take each of our different elements and mix them. Every single sound can have 4 bands of parametric EQ, compression, tape saturation, and envelope shaper. So right now, everything is going into, and we could also have aux send. So if I wanted to add a reverb, and let's say a delay, so I'll come here, let's put like maybe a 16th note delay. So I'll come here, and as we adjust our multi-delay, so we say, okay, let's make it like a ping pong delay. So now if we want it to come over and say, let's just grab our agent and let's go to our mixer. I can say, okay, I want to add delay. So say as I do this, or if I wanted to add reverb. So I could add the reverb to just that particular drum. And I could do all of my mixing. And as we do this, everything is going to be sent out to one output here. So we could do all of our mixing, but I could now take like my snare and send that to output 2. And I have 32 stereo outs. So now if we wanted to kind of do similar things, like if I wanted more of like a beat, and then treat it like more of a sampler, like an MPC style drum machine, that's when we could use like a beat agent kit. So when we do this, we don't see kind of like an actual So now that I come here, we don't see like different patterns that could be kind of shaped. This would be kind of pre-programmed, but we could do a lot more kind of sound shaping. So if I wanted to take, this, particular kick sound, I could come here and say, okay, let's just adjust the panning. And let's say this kick, I wanted to tune it up. So we can say, so if you want to get more subs, and then you could also come over here and say, I wanted to take this closed hi-hat, and we could go to pitch, and we could set different envelopes, but I could say, let's make it random. Or let's take this snare and let's go. So now that I have this selected, I could go to the pitch and say, okay, I wanted to follow the envelope, but I wanted that snare. So, and if we wanted to come over here and adjust filters on all of my drum sounds, I could come here and put like a classic filter. So let's say, okay, I wanted to just And all these parameters are automatable, and you can just right click to learn CC. And, you know, if we wanted to just drag and drop different samples, we could drag and drop those onto the instrument pads. We have all of our sample editing. So if we wanted to come here and just reverse this particular sample, I could say, okay, let's just reverse. And I wanted this sample to start, not at the tail. And then if you wanted to even take drum loops and slice, and then you could have different MIDI effects as well. So let's say I want to take the hi-hat here, and let's go ahead and turn on MIDI delay. So let's say I want to do so you have a lot of control, and again, you have kind of similar mixer. And if you wanted to take these individual pads to different mixers, at this point, when we go to our main, we could send these to different 32 stereo outputs as well. So hopefully that will help you kind of get started utilizing kind of Groove Agent, but it's incredibly powerful. But what I like to do, especially kind of in a songwriting scenario, is instead of like programming a beat, I may just kind of start off with something very simple. Okay, like I have a groove, and then I'm going to use that just to kind of write around. And then, you know, when as the song builds, this is probably more inspirational than using, you know, a typical click track. And then, you know, once as the song builds, then I will add in like different sections for verse, chorus, or drop fills in, or actually just kind of play them in real time, because these will all respond to different MIDI notes. So I could just say, let's just do a fill. And, you know, so you could start off with something very basic and then really kind of polish it very easily. So those are some of the advantages of kind of working with Groove Agent. All right. So you see question, can you show us how to load Groove Agent 1 kits into Groove Agent? There's an icon or an image of Groove Agent 1 when I select a kit slot, but when I select Groove Agent 1, there's no drum kits to select from. Samples in the browser window. How and where do we install those kits so that they're available in the browser? So I think when we go to Groove Agent, you know, we can see our different kits. And we'll see our Groove Agent 1 kits, and these often kind of show up as being blank because I think that they're all in, you know, so Groove Agent 1 was kind of the predecessor to Groove Agent SE. I think it came in version 8 was when Groove Agent SE4 was kind of implemented as part of Cubase. But I think that all of these are just kind of set in, you know, if we go to the Beat Agent kits. So all of the older kits are going to be in the Beat Agent kits. So all of those were kind of mapped into there. So I'm not sure why we see like kind of a separate icon. And that could be, you know, for compatibility with previous projects. You may, you know, you could still go back and install Groove Agent SE, but all of the kits from Groove Agent SE or all the kits from Groove Agent 1 were migrated into Groove Agent SE. So you're not missing anything. So I know that's could be pretty confusing. All right, so we had a question. So question is, as I understand it, it is inappropriate to have inserts in the stereo out. Stereo out inserts do not seem to turn off stereo out inserts when with mix down options. Is that correct? So let's say if we have a project here, and I'll just jump back to this one quickly. So there's no, you know, there's no rules, you know, with doing anything for audio processing. So it's very common to have, processing and inserts on this stereo out. So let's say if we come over here to our mix console and we're playing along and we want to go to our stereo out here. All right, so let's say, okay, I just want to throw on, limiter. And let's say, okay, I want this to also go through an envelope shaper. So if we bypass everything. All right, so, a lot of people will have a limiter or a bus compressor kind of on the master output. So that's pretty typical. But what, in regards to how it is related to when we go to the audio mix down. So if you just mix your stereo output, it will include everything through the master processing. If you're doing multiple channels here, so let's say if I want to do my stereo out and let's say I wanted the kick, because obviously as we do this, the kick and snare, all the drum sounds are changing based upon the processing. So, and when we go to our effects, at this point, we could choose the inserts and channel strip. So that will be the inserts and channel strip of the channels. Those could be included. We could have it be completely dry. So if you want to give the option of exporting completely dry material, you could do that. And we could also include the groups and sends, but also the master groups and sends. So you can include all of the master effects processing when you do the stereo mix down, depending upon your effects section that you have indicated right there. Okay, and so kind of a follow-up question with this. Can you discuss how to create stems in Cubase 12 mixdown window, for example, most common settings for stems? So a lot of times people will use stems, like let's say in this case, we had, bass, drums, and guitar, and maybe keyboards. So what a lot of people will do is come over here and say, okay, I want to take all of my drums, and we could route these to a group channel. So let's go ahead and call this drums. Sometimes people may do guitar and bass this on the same stem. Often it would be separate. So let's add a track for bass, a group track, and let's say our guitar tracks. So we'll add a group channel to that selected track. Okay, so now if I want to make stems, and I'll just do it for kind of an abbreviated section here, just for time's sake, we will go to Export Audio Mixdown, and we'll see kind of all of my group channels. So I'm going to choose to export. So this way, all of my drums will be mixed down, all my bass will be mixed down as a stem, and all my guitars will be mixed down. And we will choose to create a new audio track. So I'll say export audio. And as we do this, we'll see that we'll now have our drum stems. And we could change the naming, but at this point we could just take our particular stems would be created right there. So once it's routed to a group, at that point, once you go to the export audio mixdown, you could choose to export all of the particular group channels. So I'll just deselect those. So let's say, okay, let's export our stems. Had extraneous ones selected from last time. So now I have my drums all mixed and my guitars. So those would be the stems, and you could name them and carry names over if you wanted to so, but that's how you could create the stems. All right, so a question. Hello, Greg and team. I'm building some custom macros for a new controller setup, but I'm away from my studio machine and doing it on my laptop. Question: how do I move, transfer, share custom macros between different machines, instances of Cubase? Thanks for your time, Adam. So it's going to be saved as a preset. So the easiest way is to come over here and just to go to your edit menu and go to Profile Manager and export your profile and import the particular profile into your new system. And we showed this a little earlier. If we go to and it's going to be slightly different on Windows, but if we come over here to the presets, you could see all of your key commands. And once it's saved as a preset in Cubase, you'll see it show up as a list. The name will show up in the presets and in the key commands, and this would be in your library, preferences, Cubase on a Mac. On the Windows platform, if you go to your start menu and go to like Cubase 12, you'll see an application data and settings folder right below where you'd launched a program from the start menu or whatever it's called now. And then you could see all your presets there, and you'll see your key commands, and you can manually copy that file over. All right, so we have a question mailed in. Why does some arranger track section creeps at the height on different zoom? So where there seems to be some overlaps, let me just open up a particular project with arranger tracks. Let's see if I still have one open. Yeah. Okay, so we'll come over here to, let's say, our arranger track. So as we do this, you may notice that, some, depending on the zoom factor, that, you may notice that some of them, as they overlap, that they may change, and there may be, let me just check to see if there's, might be in preferences, there might be an adjustment for that. So I think it's just kind of showing you the data, but let me just see if we come over to see if there's any. Any preferences for it in here. I thought there was one adjustment for this. Let me just see. Maybe not. So, but I think it's just so that you can, depending on your level of zoom of how, so that it's easier to read. But let me just see if there's any additional settings for that, because I thought that there might be. All right, so say we activate it here. Yeah, so I think it's kind of just, we'll try to optimize for the particular view of it. So sorry about that, Jan. All right. All right, so let's go back to our live questions. Thanks for all the great questions. And if you've learned something, make sure that you do hit the like button. All right, trying to find my spot where I was. All right, so I think I'm close. Sorry about hitting the mic. All right. So we see in the past there was a possibility to play MIDI sequences under chord pads. Since then, some things have been changed. I don't see the possibility at the moment. So let's come over here to the chord pads. All right. So let's say if I wanted to take just like a small little. So let's say I want to take just like that rhythmic pattern there. So really all I had to do is when we go to the chord pads, we click on the edit, and then in the playing chords, you see sections, and then just drag it, not sections rather, but let's set it to pattern. And then you can see import MIDI loop, or you could just drag it and it'll just drop the MIDI part. And now when we trigger the chord pads, you could just come right over there and just trigger that. So just go to the edit section and then just put it in pattern and then just drag and drop. And then when you do that, you could just drop the MIDI part right there. So. All right, so we see Pro 12, Windows 10. Hi, Greg. Is there any way to have words, lyrics running on a separate track in the main screen? I put them in using the score track at the moment, which is only it in the window. So what a lot of people do is they will just kind of come over to the marker track. So let's say if we want to go to like our marker track setup, so we'll come here and let's just say we want to go to the settings. Okay. And at this point, you could just say, so say I'll just come here. And then, so often people will just kind of use the marker tracks themselves to put lyrics in. So if you need to navigate, and this is like really good when the singer is like, oh, go to, you know, this line. And then you could just kind of look through and say, okay, feel good, don't it make you, or ooh, baby, baby, whatever. And you could just have those in the description for the particular markers. So that's what I see a lot of people doing. and just kind of coming over here and then being able to navigate quickly. And the singer's like, oh, I want to punch this word, this phrase here. And then you could just navigate using a marker track for the lyrics. So. Okay, just kind of reading through some more comments here. All right, so I see Kevin Mehmed just asking when we can Zoom chat. So maybe next Tuesday morning or Wednesday morning of next week. That'd be great. All right. So I see from Uno Memento says, hi, I missed a question that asked about recording the choir so that the background recording does not go to the singer's microphones. Can I get a replay of this since I couldn't find it? So basically, there isn't, a perfect way of doing that, and that's why often, people are using headphones for the situation so that people could hear the backing tracks with the particular, with the particular setup, so that the backing tracks aren't recorded. So often, very careful use of polar patterns on the microphones to make sure you're not in a figure of 8. And I know if you have like 30 people in a choir singing, you may not have 30 sets of headphones for them. And if you had people bring headphones, they're all going to be, probably 70% would be wireless Bluetooth, which wouldn't really work in the situation getting all the headphones. So, you could try to maybe have it to the point where it's, the speakers are aimed at the feet and maybe you're miking from up high to mitigate some bleeding. So, but it could be, it's a long, tricky problem of why people wear headphones in the studios. Okay. Okay, just. All right, so just had a question just mailed in. Let me see if I can get to it. All right, so he said, just a question just came in. Hi, Greg. For a non-synth programmer like me who's looking for some background pads to fill out some projects, mainly presets to start, I tried Pad Shop 2, and it looked at a lot of vids about it, but the example sounded too sci-fi and creepy to me. Does Cubase Pro 12 Pro have other types of pads I could check out and maybe even mess with as presets? So there's a number of different pads, so there sometimes when people are doing demonstration of virtual instruments, there will be a lot of, really interesting sounds. But let's say if I wanted to come here, we'll just make this, like if you wanted just some great sounds, you don't have to be sci-fi sounding, but let's say even if you wanted to go to Retrolog, I use a lot of Retrolog pads. So when you come here to the settings, we can say, okay, let's go to synth pads. But even if you wanted to, so if you wanted to, And even like one that I use a lot, I think is just a strings patch from Retrolog. So if I just come over here to strings, I think Almighty Strings is one that I use a lot. And I think maybe I still have. And then if you wanted to kind of just change the particular sounds, you could come over, and if you wanted to adjust like the resonance of that. And there's a number of great pads inside of Halion Sonic as well. So there's all sorts of great options besides Pad Shop, but go through every single one because, you know, sometimes as you get into it, like I found in Pad Shop, I think Gary Gibbons, who's like a Pad Shop genius, you know, he did one. It's like on like a stay home edition, like when COVID started, and there's lots of great stuff in there. So let's say if we wanted to go to Pad Shop, there's a lot of stuff I use for different projects because I don't play keyboard well, so I tend to use a lot of pads in my compositions because of my inabilities. But so like Doomtraffic, that would be very sci-fi. But let's say if I want to go to the Stay Home edition, I think there's some really nice ones in here. But there's some really nice ones in there as well. So check out, you know, there's lots of great options for pads. All right, go back to questions. All right. So we see, hi, is there a possibility to rename chords so they fit my needs? For example, I use solfege and a chord named La sharp, but I want it to be named C flat. So I don't know if it's going to be that, you know, because it's actually not going to be kind of like a number system per se, or like solfege. It's going to be the actual chord that's indicated. But let me see if we could take a look at it. So, all right, so say we want to make this a G chord, and let's go to the preferences. There's preferences for naming chords, but they may not do solfege. So let's say event display chords pitches, and you know, so here we could do like, you know, like, you know, some more German type of stuff. So let's say note name. Oh, I guess solfege. Maybe. All right. So let's say note name by solfege. All right. So I learned something new today. So let's see if we could. Yep. So So yeah, just go to preferences, and then instead of English, choose solfege there. That's my new thing I learned in today's seminar. So thank you, Michael Michaelius, for being a genius in inventing that feature and making me look like a smart guy. He's the developer. So been with Cubase for Steinberg for maybe version 1 or so. Okay. All right, so we see Shane Hay just says, Greg, how do you get Beat Agent kit up MPC style? You selected a different track and missed how to load it. So it really depends on what preset you load. So if we go to add an instrument track here, and we'll go to Groove Agent. So generally when we look at the particular families of kits here, I know that like the Kit SE is an electronic one, Simon Phillips, or the Kit SE, Simon Phillips, those are going to be acoustic. Scoring percussion is going to be, this is a library that was released recently. This is going to be more of a beat agent. So that as we come over here to, so it really just depends on the content itself. So as you go to load kits with patterns and you look at the content library, so Beat Agent, there will be Beat Agent Prime Cuts will be more, so come over here. So this will be more Beat Agent, but if you load Simon Phillips jazz drums, or some of the other ones, laser beams, this will be going to be using the different, so this is a Beat Agent style. So it really depends on which preset you load, and if it's a like an acoustic agent preset, it'll be acoustic agent. If it's going to be a beat agent, then it'll be a beat agent style like the MPC. See that Michael Teams was playing Pink Floyd songs when David Gilmour walked into his gig, so that must have been fun. Always wanted to meet him. All right, so we see Chris Halion checking in from Columbia, South Carolina. Thanks for joining us. All right, and Chris is saying he's enjoying the Spectral Layers Pro 9 update. All right, so we see Jazz Dude saying 99 likes, one more please. All right, so that's a little while ago, so hopefully we're there. All right, so we got 100 likes, thanks. All right, you see Gerald Ely has to bail, so thanks for joining us and being part of the live stream today. All right, so we see Terry Gray just says, loving Nuendo 12, slowly switching from Pro Tools for posts, and it's going great. Thanks for those streams, Greg. So we're glad you're enjoying it, and thanks for participating in the live streams. Okay, so you just see from Kevin, question, I have some issues getting tracks in the new 1203. Can you relay this to development team at Steinberg? So if you could let me know like what issues you're having specifically. There's not a lot of info there, but if there's anything that we could recreate, we could do that. It says, I meant to play third-party plugins. Cubase is a DAW. So you should check with your plugins. You know, they could be maybe on the black or the block list rather. So, you know, go to your VST. So if you go to your VST plugin manager, you can see if your plugins are in a block list. But a lot of times, you know, if it's in a block list, that you could change. You know, you could unblock them, but realize that they're put there for a reason, that they're causing system instability. So, but let me know if there's like particular plugins. And if you're running 32-bit plugins, you need to run 64-bit. And sometimes you may run plugins that have VST, like when they're installed, they'll install VST2, VST3, 32-bit, and 64-bit. So ideally, you want 64-bit VST3 plugins because that adds to more system stability. All right, you also see from Kevin, I notice the levels of the sound when 12. Cubase isn't giving me problems when I raise the guitar volume levels with the vocal track turned or louder. If they can even make contact tech support. Well, I guess we could talk next week, Kevin, if you want. All right, so I see a question from Terry Gray. Anyone using a Stream Deck with Cubase/Nuendo? I see a lot of post folks using them. Is it worth it? So I think the Stream Deck is really cool. I use one, and I set up kind of in Cubase 12 with the MIDI remote, kind of all the menu systems. So like every menu in Cubase I set up, and it's cool because you could kind of customize it, and you could, you know, type the text of what it is, and you could have nested folders within folders. So I think it's a pretty great little thing. Okay, so just see from Pasquale Russo says, thank you, but that was not what I was looking for. My question is the following, and let me see if it comes up. All right, just still reading through comments. Okay, so I see Pascal's question. The issue is that when I insert a new chord using the chord track, for example, in the selector, chord is named C sharp, but then displayed as D flat. Okay, so let's say if I put in a C sharp chord here in my chord track, I will come over here. So let's say, all right, so we do C sharp and we see it as D flat. So all you have to do is from the info line is just do an enharmonic shift, and then you could switch it, just say enharmonic shift from sharp to flat. So you could just set it directly there. So let me know if that works for you. Okay, so let's see. I think I might be at the end of the questions. Let's see how we're doing in time. So we're about 3.5 hours in. All right, so we see that Pascal, we got that answered for him. All right, so let's see if there's more questions that come up. We know it's a Friday afternoon or Friday evening on a summer day, so we'll see if more questions come in. We see Michael Teams is saying revelation of the day. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Hope that everyone has a great weekend. So we'll be back on our normal schedule of 2 live streams starting next week on Tuesday and Friday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Okay, so we have a question from Saragos. Hey, Greg, could you show us how to create the favorite samples folder inside Cubase? All right, so all you have to do is once we, go to a particular folder. So I'm going to come over to my media bay on the right-hand side. I'm going to click on the file browser. So let's say I really want this to be my favorite samples, this audio folder right here. So we go, into your folder hierarchy on your computer, right-click and click Add Favorite. And now as we do this, so we'll call this Saragos. All right, so now all I have to do when you go home, I say go to favorites, and we can now just come right over here and all the samples in that particular folder will be set. So once again, go to your file browser, right click and add to favorites. And then when we come over here, you'll see your favorites tab and you could just add your favorites right there. All right, so we see sometimes I find I like a sound from another project and can't find it. Importing tracks from other projects is too long a procedure. So if we wanted to do that, we go to File Browser and let's say, okay, I wanted to go to, and this just kind of my particular, so we'll say, okay, I'll go to Documents and I wanted to go to Projects. And I wanted to go to this project. I want to go to audio. So now I could just kind of click here. And then I could just drag that directly into a folder right from there. Okay. All right, so we'll see if there's any more questions. If not, we will wrap up. Thanks everyone for the wonderful questions. I hope that everyone has learned a new tip or trick. And will use it in their next production of using Cubase or Nuendo or other Steinberg products. So we'll wait just a minute and wrap up if we're done. All right, so with that, I guess we will go ahead and wrap up. And if you have questions that you want to send in advance, you could send them to clubcubase@steinberg.de and check out the summer sale going on. If you're looking to add, if you want your Halion library manager to look as good as mine, that's a great place to go ahead and start. So, but we'll go ahead and wrap up. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy. And we will see everyone back on Tuesday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Thank you very much.